This is Nan McKay, and I would like to introduce you today to Michele D'Amico. Michele is the founder and CEO of Vetta. She is a Marshall Goldsmith-certified professional and an executive leadership coach, identifying and leveraging, let's call them patterns in behavior to drive change and increase the results. So her mission is to help leaders make better decisions faster. So welcome, Michele.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Michele, your tagline is reach your peak.
Yeah.
So what does your company offer in leadership and collaboration within that leadership?
So we offer one-on-one coaching, as you were describing there, Marshall Goldsmith stakeholder-centered coaching, and just other kinds of one-on-one coachings. We offer coaching and training, team training, other kinds of leadership training. So we offer all of that. And basically, like you said, I'm a psychologist. Okay. So I use those, what I know about behaviors, right? And to try to help to leverage what I know to change behaviors, to, move people forward, to get people to a better place, right? And also to then, of course, increase the bottom line for organizations, of course, because then we work as a team and we work as more collaborative, there's more innovation. Psychological safety is a big one, so that's where the EQ comes in. So I do a lot of EQ work, which is emotional intelligence and emotional empathy. So yeah, I do a lot of that work.
So tell me what you mean by emotional intelligence. I mean, I certainly know about the leadership courses. I've taught many of those.
Okay.
But how we relate it over here, I think in team building. And is it in behavioral styles, or how do you do it?
Okay, well, that's a great question. So first, let me talk a little bit about what emotional intelligence is, right? And your EQ, that emotional quotient. We all know what IQ is, right? It's your IQ, right? And IQ is very important. But believe it or not, the top 10% of performers in business also have EQ. Okay, so IQ is great, but you get into that, the environment, the work at the professional environment, you've got to have EQ. And so what I mean by that, your emotional intelligence, empathy, maybe that you have, right? And emotional intelligence really covers, it's like 4 components to emotional intelligence. The first one is self-awareness, right? You got to be self-aware. That is the foundation for emotional intelligence. So that's self-awareness. Then we get into self-regulation, right? And self-management. And I'll talk a little bit more about this as we go forward, but then we get into the empathy and the social awareness aspect of emotional intelligence. And then finally into relationship management, which is what really, we use in teamwork, right? How do we manage relationships? Right? How do we manage conflict? How do we manage our emotions, right? Because our emotions affect all the people around us. So how do we do that, right? And that's a self-regulation piece.
Well, how do people develop that awareness?
That's a great question. Okay, so it takes work. It takes some motivation, right? You got to want to do this, okay? But to develop that self-awareness, it's really listening, right? Start listening to people around you, right? Listening to how do you react, right? Pay attention. How are you reacting to maybe a trigger, right? That's happening for you, some kind of trigger, some kind of emotion that you're feeling, why? Where's that coming from? Right? And how does it affect others? So as you start asking yourself some of those questions, you start to become a little more self-aware of, what your triggers are, what your emotions are, and how they affect other people, which is, developing empathy, right, is in that emotional intelligence is knowing, understanding your emotions and understanding how they affect other people around you. So you just have to you have to ask yourself these questions. You're going to stop in the minute, right? I know I've worked with some leaders who they immediately go into, if something happens, they might go into a rage almost, right? It's like, what did you do that for? Why did it, or whatever. So you have to start to take a step back. Wait a minute, was that helpful when I did that, when I said that? And why did I do that? Where did that come from? Because we can fix this, right? So those kinds of things you start asking yourself, you start taking a step back and listening to what other people might be, how they feel about you. How do they feel about you in your organization, right? And that's where I think sometimes the Marshall Goldsmith method comes in really nicely, because that is a 360 basically that we do with other stakeholders and other leaders. Say, okay, what are these strengths? What are the things they can improve upon? Those kinds of things. So you start listening to what other people are saying.
So when you go in to an organization, it sounds like you're doing an assessment to find out, with using this tool, to find out what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, how are they behaving in certain situations, are they behaving appropriately or inappropriately? And then when you say 360, I assume you mean in their work-life balance as well, or?
It's really, what are their strengths at work? What are the strengths that they bring to the table? What are the things they can improve upon? Because the Marshall Goldsmith method is it's not a full-on 360 that maybe some people have the understanding of. It's really 3 basic questions, right? What are the strengths? What are the things to improve upon? And if there were one thing to stop, start, do more of, or do less of, what might that be for this person, right? And so that way, when you get that feedback, you have to listen to that feedback, right? You want to hear, oh, this is how they see me. Oh, they see me as a rageaholic when I'm in the meetings, or, oh, they see me, right? And what we're trying to do with developing that emotional intelligence is to create more psychological safety within the team, within the organization, within the culture, right? So that people don't feel threatened, right? When they maybe have an idea, or maybe they've done something wrong, right? Or something, made a mistake or whatever. So they don't feel threatened. We want some psychological safety. We want people to be able to don't have the Sunday scaries, right? When Sunday comes and they go, oh, I don't want to go to work, right? We want them to go to work. We want them to feel like they're heard, they're understood. And so developing emotional intelligence within our leaders, it's really, really important. And we find now there's a lot of studies being done, Korn Ferry, Gallup, a lot of surveys are being done. You'd say why people are leaving their jobs, right? And so we've learned in a lot of cases, it's not just money. It's my leaders don't care about me. My leaders are mean. My leaders don't know what I do. My leaders don't help me develop my own leadership potential, right? And so you have to, as a leader, have some kind of emotional intelligence to be able to do all of those things, develop your people, and be able to have some mindful communication with them, right?
Well, I have a couple of questions. One is, do you sit down with people then and give them a one-on-one? And then do you also do any team building or teamwork on the basis of that?
Absolutely, both. A lot of times I'm working just with the leader to develop this emotional intelligence, right? Because there are ways you can learn emotional intelligence. This is not something that that you're born with, and if you don't have it, you'll never get it. You can actually develop it. So I work with them on developing the emotional intelligence, and then there are other times when I'll work with the team as well. We do team building around emotional intelligence, communication, right? Better communication, trust, and psychological safety, those kinds of things.
So do you see any patterns between generations or among generations? In other words, are you seeing that you don't care about me is more of a younger generation? Like, is that a Gen Z? Is that a millennial? Or is there any correlation there?
Yeah, I actually, what I've been seeing, it seems like it's across the board anymore, right? But definitely, I think Gen Z, millennials, I think they've really opened that door, right? And then, of course, we had COVID, which really like just kicked it wide open, right? For people. And so, oh my gosh, So I do see it across the board though, and male and female, I see it both. So a lot with females, I will say that, yeah, but I do see.
So awareness and feedback is both important, and the willingness to change if necessary,
Yeah.
or at least be flexible enough to listen and see what they could do to adapt.
Yes.
I'm wondering whether there's any other ways that somebody can develop a better EQ score.
Oh, yes. Okay. How about self-regulation, right? Let's talk about that for a little bit. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, right? He wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, and he has this great quote that let me make sure I don't, completely mess it up, but between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose what our response is. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So self-regulation is really, really upset right now by what they said or what that person did. I'm really upset, but I am not going to, I'm going to control my emotion because I'm in a professional setting. And by the way, this helps personally as well in relationships, but I'm in a professional setting. I am not going to go into a rage or yell or scream or anything like that. I'm going to regulate my emotion right now in this moment. So sometimes it's about breathing technique. So take a breath, right? Sometimes it's about walking away for a few minutes, right? And then coming back. Find ways to go do something that you enjoy. Go grab some water. Sometimes just take a drink of water to cut the tension. Excuse me, to cut the tension. Other ways that you can do it in your daily life. There's a wonderful thing that it's called 5 Innocent Reasons. And so whenever somebody says something to you that maybe puts you off, whatever, or does something, right? Like here in LA and people cut you off on the freeway, right? And instead of emotionally getting, think of 5 innocent reasons why this person might have said or done what they did. Right. Not only does it give you some space between, right, the stimulus and the response here, but it also starts to help you develop that empathy and emotional intelligence that says, well, okay, maybe that person, had a really bad morning at home, and so it's okay, right? Or maybe, right. So you start thinking of 5 innocent reasons. Now, sometimes I have trouble coming up with 5. I can do 3, sometimes 5 is a little more, but it's a great exercise. The other thing you can do is read fiction. It's really interesting because reading fiction, why do you think reading fiction makes, can help you develop that?
My guess is that there's a lot more emotion in fiction than there would be in nonfiction.
Now that's interesting. Yes, you're probably right. One of the other things is that you have to put yourself in the person's shoes that you're reading about, right?
Good point.
Right. And that's empathy. You're putting yourself in their shoes. And so reading fiction is a really good way to develop that emotional intelligence. So there's a lot of things you can do, learning how to communicate better, right? Either via email, a lot of times people don't think about what they're writing, so type it up, don't send it, come back later and reread it. So there's a lot of things you can do to start developing that, which helps to develop the trust, the psychological safety, and all of those great things that make us want to go to work.
I do remember a couple of times that I sent a couple of emails I wished I had, and you could try to rescind them, but they
Yeah.
went through. Everything's too fast today.
Yep, exactly. So, and so I think self-regulation is a big one. When you ask, like, what can we do? I think self-regulation is a big one. Because our emotions don't just affect us, they affect everyone around us.
That's very true. That's really an important statement. Your emotions don't affect just you, they affect everybody around you. And what I was thinking when you were talking about driving on the freeway and somebody cutting you off or whatever, is I know they do in LA. I lived in San Diego for a long time. It's the same kind of thing. But I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking the issue is we don't realize sometimes that it's not about us at all.
Yes.
It's about what's happening with that other person. It's really not about even why. So why should I get mad at this? It's not even about me.
That's perfect. That is a perfect example of empathy. It's not about me.
Yeah.
It's not about me. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's perfect. Yeah.
Well, this is so interesting. Can you think of maybe 3 takeaways that you would like us to have from this conversation?
Sure. Yes. Practice. Definitely practice. It is, you can develop it. So practice in your personal life as well as your professional life. Work on listening. We don't listen well enough. We really don't. We're always we want to say what we want to say, right? We want to write, or we're kind of listening there's like 5 levels of listening, and you want to get to the top where you're listening with your ears, with both ears, with your brain, and with your heart, right? Listen, right? Listen. And then lastly, I would say, do whatever you can do to become self-aware in all aspects of your life. Who are you? What are your values? What do these emotions mean? What are your triggers? Become self-aware. Well, who am I in this space, right?
And I guess the big question, am I who I want to be?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question. Yes, thank you.
But this has been so much fun, Michele. Thank you so much for sharing all this with us and joining us today.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. I know we had trouble getting our schedules connected, but we finally did it. So,
Yay!
yeah. Thank you.